Dreadful. The First World War was particularly so. Its redeeming features in the memory are the raw courage amid the horror and the hardship, and the cavalier flourishes. One who knew the horror and the daring cavalier approach is 83-year-old George Harvey of Port Sunlight. After serving in the trenches, he became a First World War fighter pilot. That aviation experience makes him remarkable. Remarkable, it seems to people these days, in different ways.
I would say that where you get the seriously minded people, they do ask for the conditions and how we faced up to the trials of an early undertaking. And often you are complimented on having been very courageous in going forward into such a thing. But at the same time, there is a great deal of good-natured leg-pulling goes on, mostly the old idea that we were tied together with string and wire, and apart from that, it was a lark.
The turn of the century, in the clear blue skies over Germany, came a roaring and a thundering and it never heard like the screaming sound of a big war bird. Up in the sky, a man in a plane, Baron von Richthofen was his name. 80 men tried, 80 men died. Now they're buried together on the countryside. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 or more. The bloody Red Baron was running up the score. 80 men died trying to end that spree of the bloody Red Baron of Germany. In the nick of time, a hero arose, a funny-looking dog with a big black nose. He flew into the sky to seek revenge, but the Baron shot him down.
Hers is Boyle the Goose.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50 or more. The bloody Red Baron was running up the score. 80 men died trying to end that spree of the bloody Red Baron of Germany. Now Snoopy swore he'd get that man, so he had to think promptly of a new battle plan. He challenged the Germans to a real dogfight. While the Baron was laughing, he got him in his sight.
Harvey, I want to talk to you particularly about your exploits as a pioneer flyer, but I know that before you became a pilot you were in the infantry. So let's hear first about your experiences on the ground on the Western Front and something about conditions there. We're told that conditions were horrific. Is that the word that you would use?
Yes, I think it would be quite correct to say that.
Why? Tell me something about those conditions.
Well, when we were in trenches, often we were in parts of the country where it was flooded and we're up to our waists in water, and as far as I can recollect, our spells of duty used to be something between 10 and 14 days, according to how bad conditions were. Then we would be taken out and as getting what they call a rest occasion. This entailed us probably going back from the main lines at a distance of approximately 14 or 15 miles. This was the sort of rest and recuperation we got, and then we returned again. And at that time, as well as living under these conditions, we were inundated with great large rats swimming around, even into your dugouts. The way to maintain and keep our food safe, we generally hung it in parcels from the roof of what we thought was lovely little dugouts. These small dugouts really were only digging into the clay, putting a bit of corrugated iron over the top. And it was from those little corrugated places that we would then hang our parcels. Otherwise, rats would be away with the food in no time. I think we are correct in saying conditions were really unbelievable. In looking back, one does sometimes think, did we suffer like this, or is it all been a dream compared to our present day's standards of living?
What about the actual fighting? What was the nature of the fighting as you experienced it?
Well, more or less, whilst we were stationed around Armentières, a lot of the fighting was making what we would call a slight attack into the enemy's position in the hope of getting a German prisoner that would be able to give us some information. Actual hand-to-hand fighting occurred very, very little there. But in moving on, as we eventually did, to the Somme, for the first Battle of the Somme, which was on July the 1st, 1916, then it was real fierce hand-to-hand fighting. I think we went in as a battalion of 1,200, and I think we came out with just over 150. And of course, then that was something very, very sad, insofar as you'd lost a double of a lot of the good mates that you'd been with in training. And probably, I would say then, more than any time in my life, it brought home the horror of the whole business and the futility of it.
Let's move now to aviation. How was it that you came to move over to the Royal Flying Corps in, was it 1916?
Yeah. Well, having returned from the Battle of the Somme, my colonel sent for me and said that as a reward for good work in that battle, I was to be sent home and recommended for a commission. I got the commission in the Cheshire Regiment. And then, as soon as I was properly commissioned, there was a cry for pilots. I did theoretical training in Reading for 3 weeks, approximately. Then from there I was transferred to Tadcaster in Yorkshire, where we then started to do our proper training as flyers. That, I think, took approximately 6 to 7 weeks. Then we went on to Marsk to do our gun training out of fire, and then we came back to Tadcaster, and then we were then given your chance to go solo and get your wings. In all, I would say that you could roughly say we were at least 3 months before we were passed out as a pilot, as far as a fighter pilot was concerned, because I was flying single-seater scout machines, which, as I say, took us approximately 3 months in which to master everything.
I know, Mr. Harvey, that men like you get their legs pulled, that there were flying contraptions which were tied together with string and wire. But how would you describe the planes? Planes like the Camel, the Sopwith Pup, and the Scout experimental single-seater fighter?
Well, I do get my leg pulled an awful lot by my comrades in the Legion, and I suppose the justification for saying there was string and wire was that in the very early ones, the Camels and the Morris Farman, they were literally like that. We were also greatly exposed to the weather. Our equipment being just long leather coats lined with sheep's wool, great long thigh boots lined with sheep's wool, and helmets also lined, and great gauntlet gloves. This was our way of going around, and at all times in those type of planes you could see down below in everything. But eventually the Scout Experimental, as was known as SE-5s, were the finer machines introduced during that type of war. And in fact, it was the best machine introduced during that war.
What was its speed?
The SE-5, to us in those days, we thought, it was one of our common thoughts, we thought we'd never manage it when we were first put on these prior to going to France. But it was able to go on the level at 90 miles an hour. That was our top speed. But for diving and even fighting, you could dive it at 125 miles an hour. That was the maximum you durst put it to.
And how did that compare with, say, the Sopwith Pup or the Camel?
The Sopwith Pup and the Camel, they were capable of doing on the level something about the region between 60 and 70. And in diving, you couldn't dive those any faster than about 80. And they were, particularly with the Camel, they were liable for you to lose a cylinder, as they were engined by what we used to term rotary engines. When the SE-5 came along, that was fitted with an engine that we called stationary, fixed as a V-type shape. It was a Hispano-Suiza engine. With Scouts, you were your pilot, your navigator, your gunner, you were everything rolled in one. Because when they brought the SE-5s, they had then perfected an idea that you could fire through your propeller as it was revolving. And that only entailed you pressing a button on what we commonly called the joystick in those days. Prior to the SE-5 coming along with synchronized firing like that, we had Lewis guns fitted on the top of the plane, which, if they jammed, you were trying to hold a joystick between your knee while you were trying to reach above your head and set your machine back in motion again, or your gun back in motion.
I want to hear more from you about these planes and your experiences and your feelings as you flew them, but I think we'll pause here and have a piece of music. What would you like?
At that time, several good musicals were running through the theatres of London. But I think it's fair and right to say that Roses of Picardy was taken from one of them. I don't think I'm making a mistake in saying that, but I can say that quite definitely, both with the Flying Corps laddies and with all the infantry, Roses of Picardy was a very, very popular song with us all.
She is watching by the poplars, calling it with the sea blue eyes. She is watching and longing and praying where the long white roadway lies, and the song stirs in the silence as the wind in the bow above. She listens and starts and trembles. 'Tis the first little song of love. Roses are shining in Picardy, in the hush of the silver dew. Roses are flowering in Picardy, but there's never a rose like you. And the roses will die with the summertime. time, and our roads may be far apart. But there's one rose that dies not in Piccadilly. 'Tis the rose that I keep in my heart. Roses are shining in Piccadilly, in the hush of the silver dew. Roses are flowering in Piccadilly, but there's never a rose like you.
Mr. Harvey, I know it's really asking you to sharpen up your memory, to take us back 60 years and describe things in some detail, but I'm wondering if you could do that for us and describe a dogfight in detail, as much detail as you can muster. What was it like? What was the nature of it and the atmosphere of it?
It's really hard, I suppose, to try and recollect your thoughts at so long ago. But the impression left with me was that there would be lots and lots of our lads and plenty of German planes, and we'd be wheeling around one another, firing our guns, and in the main hoping that you could fire and bring somebody down. It was during one of these dogfights against the German ace von Richthofen that I, unfortunately, was caught and brought down in flames. Fortunately for me, I was able to do what we termed in those days a side slip until the machine was a matter of only perhaps 30 feet from the ground when I had to jump for it. As you will appreciate, in those days there were no such things as parachutes. And in that time, in that jump, I was very, very fortunate insofar as I only just damaged my knee a bit, my left knee, which I was under the circumstances, I think was a very, very lucky indeed. Once again, I should say, Providence was looking after me.
Was that the only time that you came down?
I came down. I also had a very, very nasty smash during training, which again was not my own fault. In the SE5, prior to me going to France, when I found out after I'd got my wings and I was finally doing my SE5 flight, we had what they called an adjustable tailplane, which allowed you to elevate quicker or dive. This jammed on me, and there was no possible way of me guiding the plane, and I took what I thought was the right attitude at that time. I simply pulled the joystick as vigorous as I could and broke a control wire, which meant that the plane then spun into the earth. The vivid recollection I have of that, apart from not being too badly injured, was that my colonel, or my squadron leader then, sent for me, and he said, "Harvey, go and get another plane and go out again and stunt when you get up." He said, "I'll watch you from the air." He said, "You stunt and do all the stunts that you've been taught, such as diving, rolls, loops." These were the things that we were taught for the invading when we were in a dogfight. That, to my mind, at that time as a young fellow, I thought was absolute sheer cruelty. I thought he's got no damn heart at all. Anyhow, I went up, I performed, I came back, and then when I landed, he put his arm on my shoulder. He said, now, come along to the mess hall and have a cup of tea. He said, and now I'll tell you why I did that. He said, if I'd have sent you on leave after that nasty crash, he said, you'd have been no good as a pilot after it. Now, he said, you can turn around and laugh at it. And he said, and you can now have 48 hours leave to get over it. And since then, I've learned that, well, I've heard once or twice in life, that if you have anything like that, even a motor car accident, if you don't go right away, you lose your nerve. But I couldn't say it then. I was only 21, and I couldn't say it. I thought a lot of things I can't say in front of the wife about him. I thought, the flame. But that's what he said. That was his explanation as to why he'd sent me off immediately.
Did you get any joy out of stunting on other occasions? I'm not talking about that occasion, but at other times.
Well, whilst in this country, particularly in this country, after I'd once learned properly and after I'd got my wings, there was a small wait before I was posted to France, and in that time we did thoroughly enjoy, or I did thoroughly enjoy, morning flights, and it is just hard to try and explain to anybody who's not experienced it the wonders of going up through a cloud and then seeing the sky apparently as far off as ever again above your head was the most wonderful feeling. And then having gone through a cloud, you look down and it just looked like a sheet of fleece or snow that you'd come through. And those were really very gratifying moments.
And would you be stunting at times like that? Would you be practicing looping the loop?
Yes,
and side slips?
I would be doing all those for my own sake and for my own perfection. I always very, very vividly recollect that on my first attempt with a loop, I got into what I've subsequently learned was what they call air pockets. And my plane literally dropped upside down. To me, it seemed an eternity, but obviously, as I know better now, it couldn't have been seconds before we hit the solid air and righted ourselves again. But when you get into pockets, these were some of the dangers, particularly more so from people who were flying out in India, because I believe they got tremendous air pockets there and they could have some very bad accidents.
I suppose you'd be quietly praying at a time like that, would you?
Yes, very much so.
Were there many times when you wondered whether you were going to get out of this, whether you were going to get out of one situation or another?
Well, yes, I think it was fair to say that nasty crash. I thought then, well, this must be the end, the way I'm going down. I also thought that I'm going to be lucky not to be sort of burnt alive when I was in France and this other affair occurred. But, as I say, in both cases, and I'm not what you call a highly religious man, but I still think that Providence looked after me.
When you became quite proficient in stunting, were there times when you were simply showing off? This is before you went to France, when you were still in this country. Were there times when you were just showing off, being one of the lads, if you like? Did you ever put the wind up somebody, do something of which you felt, well, perhaps a little bit ashamed later on?
Yes, I did once. And I have thought, since I got old and had a bit more sense, if possible, I did one morning, still while only training, I saw a lady hanging out the washing, and I dived down very, very low. And I could see the poor dear drop all the wash, drop the line and everything. At that time, I thought, this is great fun. But later on, I thought, well, what a rotten trick to have done on the poor soul.
And what are these stories that we hear of pilots of those days who fancied their change of beer and so would hop over to another part of the country, by plane, of course, just for a change of beer?
Well, what we did, again, quite unofficially, but 4 or 5 of us, I suppose, a bit wilder than we ought to have been, I put it all down to our ages, of course, but we did have a trick of nipping over from Tadcaster to Harrogate and landing on what we call the Stray. I think it was called, yes, the Stray, landing on what we call the Stray. And there was a very nice hotel there, and we used to nip in, have a couple of quick ones, and nip back again. But this was contrary to all rules and should never have been done.
Yes, you're having difficulty in keeping a straight face there, aren't you?
Yeah.
When you look now at your television set and see Concorde, or more particularly see some of the military aircraft of today, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's a gain, I think, in the lifetime of anybody, but particularly people like myself who was original flyers. It seems a great, I use the word term, miracle, to think that in the matter of one's lifetime we have come from the little things that I flew at 90 miles an hour to the type of planes now that can carry safely hundreds of people and at the speeds they accomplish, and one is lost in wonderment that ordinary men have developed these planes to the extent that they have done in one lifetime.
I suppose you pinch yourself at times, do you, and ask if you're not dreaming?
Well, you do, honestly. Yeah, I mean, you just... Well, you're lost for words. You can't credit that such a thing has come along like this.
It is really bewildering, isn't it? Because I suppose if you talk to a 16-year-old today about a Sopwith pup, well, it could be something that belonged to the age of the dinosaurs, couldn't it?
It could very well, could very well.
Those magnificent men in their flying machine, they go up to the up, they go down to the down. They entangle the ladies and steal the scene with their up to the up, and their down to the down. Up, down, flying around, looping the loop and defying the ground. They're all rightfully keen, those magnificent men in their flying machine. They can fly upside down with their feet in the air. They don't think of danger, they really don't care. Newton would think he had made a mistake to see those young men and the chances they take. Those magnificent men in their flying machine, they go up to the up, they go down to the down. They entangle the ladies and steal the scene.